Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Wild Free Will podcast. It has been a hot minute since I've been on here, and I'll admit that I have a little bit of nerves around it, which, um, yeah, it honestly feels good because it's been a while, basically the summer, since I recorded an episode, and it's been a while since I've done a video as well. And so, I don't know, it kind of feels like riding a bike and learning to ride a bike at the same time. It's a little bit of everything at once, but that's not a bad thing. And, when we feel these kinds of butterflies or we feel a little bit of nerves, it's usually a really good sign, in all honesty, that we're on the right path and we're moving in the right direction. So I'm excited to be here talking to you today. And today we are going to talk about letting go of control. And so letting go of control, I feel like that's not something that is particularly appealing to any of us. Or maybe it's just me, but it does not interest me at all, certainly. And I think that part of that comes from the fact that, okay, for me personally, I've been in a transition period. It's the longest transition period in the history of all transition periods ever. And I would like to be out of it now. Thank you, universe. Hear this. And the reality is that I'm not. And what happens when we're in these kinds of uncomfortable periods is that we tend to try to force, to strive, to do whatever it is that we do or want to do or think we need to do to get out of the situation as fast as we possibly can. And I think that that's a very human reaction. It's really normal for us to feel this way, for that to be our experience. But we actually have very little power when it comes to that situation. We cannot force ourselves to be on the other side of something. We can take steps to be on the other side of something. But when we are in a point of our lives where we're learning something that we're meant to be learning, we really can't force our way out of it. Okay? And when I say losing control, okay, what do I mean by that? I mean letting go of the need to push, strive, and kind of force your way out of it, right? Why do I use the term losing control? Because what happens when we're in these situations is we tend to, how can I say this? We tend to begin to take control or micromanage aspects of our lives, potentially even other people, in the people that we have relationships with, in order to feel like we have some form of control over our lives when we're in a situation that is making us really uncomfortable. So it's, again, I think a very natural and human response, but it's not going to get you anywhere. One of the things that I will say from what I've been going through is that I have felt an increase in anxiety. Now, I would argue that I live with a baseline of anxiety that's relatively high. And I'm not proud of it. I don't think it's a good thing. Do not condone it. Do not advertise it. I'm not saying that this is something that we should all be doing, but I do tend to kind of run a little bit anxious. And when I'm feeling anxious, it means that my baseline has increased. And it's not good, because if I'm already anxious as a baseline and I'm feeling anxious on top of that, right? Because my baseline would be something that I'm not necessarily aware of on a daily basis. The anxiety is there, but it's not necessarily something that is running the show. But when I'm saying or experiencing the feeling of anxiety, then that means that I've gone a level higher. Unfortunately, obviously, none of this is a good thing. But when we're in those positions, maybe this is just me, I somehow doubt it, but perhaps it is. If I'm in a situation where I'm feeling anxiety, all of a sudden I'm trying to micromanage and control everything. And let me tell you how this has played out for me. badly. It has played out badly. Because all I've done is, in trying to micromanage aspects of my life, I've actually been far less successful in accomplishing basic things, in like really relishing life, enjoying life, because there is this aspect of like everything kind of needs to be in control or under control. And so like there's been also like a lack of lightness and a lack of spontaneity because I've been allowing the anxiety to run the show. Okay. And like, why is this important? Why is it important that I'm sharing this? I mean, that's an excellent question. And I think that right now, collectively, we are in a situation where we're all feeling a little bit of stress, whether that be because of the political situation, whether that be because of the economic situation. I do think that collectively there is a sort of heavier energy. I would argue negative energy. I would say it's not a nice thing to say, but I do think that the overall energy of the people in the world, like everyone is going through something very big, very strong right now. And like as we move around in the world, we're feeling that. I feel that at least. I've said that even to my partner, like when we're out and about, just like living our daily lives, like we're getting groceries, like you can feel that there's a little bit more of a like sort of hectic energy. Okay. So collectively, I think that we're in the midst of this sort of discomfort and we all want to get out of it. And we are in, I think, the midst of a transition period where maybe, and I want to say this with a really optimistic point of view, perhaps things are getting worse right now before they're getting better, if that makes sense. And so I think that this conversation is important from that perspective, but I also think it's important because the theme of the podcast and my business in general would be wild free well. And those are my core values. Those are the things that are the most important to me. And in living the way that I have been living and in absorbing what I feel is the collective energy that's around right now, it is making it harder to be in alignment with the things that I know are most important to me. And this is a huge this is some of the core work that I do with clients. We need to figure out what is important to us and we need to find a way to embody that. And it can be really difficult to do that when we feel like we're coming up a brick wall. And in this scenario, that brick wall would potentially be the collective energy around us. But we do have to find a way to be a little bit more aligned with what we really want in life. And I don't mean want in the kind of manifestation sense. I'm not talking about the external things. I'm just talking about like how we want to feel. We need to find a way to be connected to that on a daily basis. And I think that we need to believe that the situation can get better. I think easier said than done also, but it is vital. And that goes for the collective situation, obviously, and then it also goes for our personal situations. But in my case in particular, I think that feeding the anxiety, and what I mean by that is buying into it, believing it, giving it attention, and not perhaps focusing on other aspects of my life, has been stealing some of my freedom from me. And freedom is what's on the other side. Despite everything that I've said, to a certain extent, I think that the anxiety is a choice. Yikes. Unpopular opinion. I would imagine that would be a very unpopular opinion. I do not think that this is true in all cases. There are different kinds of anxiety, but I think that the anxiety that we're feeling collectively, and I think that the anxiety that I'm describing from a personal perspective, is something that can be avoided if my mindset is where it needs to be. So now I'm outing myself. I'm a mindset coach who is struggling with mindset. And to that, I'd almost kind of say, well, duh. Well, duh. Because we are often teaching the thing that we most need to learn. And the thing that I talk about all the time and the thing that I love is naturally one of the things that I am called towards, that I am called to work on, to improve, and to, be on this planet right now to explore. And so what I've been going through and what I've been feeling, I think has been me choosing to believe that story. I think that in my case, potentially in your case, and not necessarily in every case, I think that anxiety is a choice. Because what anxiety is, at least in my experience, is not believing that things can be any better and feeding into the worry. Now, this goes directly against what I would tell any client to do. And I think that that is something that on my end has also been extremely frustrating because I want to live in alignment all the time. But I think that this is life. And I also think that in a world of like shiny things, shiny information, shiny celebrities, and, you know, people who are like living these quote unquote perfect lives, even the people who are teaching you how to do something are struggling, and perhaps they're just not talking about it. And perhaps I shouldn't be either. Maybe this is a bad decision at the end of the day. Only time will tell. but we need to be honest with ourselves, and we need to call ourselves out on our bullshit, which is what I'm here doing, right? Because it's important to say the hard thing and to own the things that you're going through. Just being really real with yourself and striking a balance between cutting yourself some slack and being responsible for yourself. And it's not always easy to be in that place, to be in that balanced state of being kind and being gentle and understanding that you're just a little human, you're doing the best that you can, and then looking at the landscape of your life and saying, this isn't it. And I know that I could do better. And if not better, perhaps I could certainly do differently. I could do things differently. And then making the choices to move from there. So, what does that look like? It looks like taking a step back and not forcing things. That's the first step. Because if you're in a space of feeling anxious, overwhelmed, stressed, and you are in a position where you are micromanaging your time, your commitments, the people in your life potentially. I mean, one, that's no fun for anybody, and it's not likely to improve your relationships over time, in all honesty. But if that's the case, then we need to really take a step back and at first recognize that we're doing that. Recognize the ways in which we are trying to control every aspect of our lives. And again, there is a balance here because you are in control of your life, yes, and you are not in control of other people. You are not in control of what goes on in the world necessarily. I mean, we all have a role to play, I suppose, but we are not like in control of the energy that is collectively around us. We are only ever in control of ourselves, in control of our own energy. So we have control and we don't. And it's this kind of tug of war between doing your part and allowing things to unfold, right? And allowing yourself to be in flow with the energy of the world, with the energy of the universe, whatever, right? And being mindful about what energy you invite into your life, whether that be through friends in your social circle, or the people that you engage with at work, or like the conversations that you have with your family or your partner, or the media that you're engaging with, right? And that you're consuming, because that all plays a massive role, whether we like to believe it or not. And I think that if more people believed that it did, then we would be seeing a very different world in front of us right now. But we are obsessed with our own consumption. And that is, anyways, a conversation for another episode. But we need to be mindful of the ways that we are kind of, again, either fighting against what is happening. So we are striving to like force control, micromanage, or fighting, we have resistance against how we're feeling. So we feel crappy, or we feel anxious, or we feel overwhelmed or stressed or whatever, afraid, whatever it might be. And instead of being okay with that and saying, giving yourself permission and saying, okay, it's okay to be here right now. It's okay to feel that. We're like, well, I don't want to be here. I want the shiny life. I want to feel good. I want to be doing X, Y, Z. And we're just creating more resistance. So while we're already walking in mud, it's almost quickly becoming quicksand because we're fighting against ourselves. And it's just making the situation worse. From there, I think that it's important to recognize the ways in which you do have control over your life and the things that you can do in the immediate now. Oh, no, there's a mosquito. And I am very susceptible to them. They love me. Anyways, but doing things to understand how we're influencing or exacerbating the situation. So in my particular case, I had mentioned, I think I'm feeding the beast because I'm buying into the story of the anxiety. I'm buying into the sense of worry and fear and also powerlessness, which is actually really interesting because I do, and I have felt, I guess, like I have not had the power to change my situation because the power to change my situation is here. And that can be really, really challenging and really confronting for people in general, including me. Like it's not like there's no hierarchy here, as I say all the time. But we need to understand that we're not in control of everything, and we have to understand where our point of power is, and that's not always really simple to do because sometimes our point in power is recognizing the anxiety or recognizing the stress or overwhelm or whatever it is and saying, oh, that's interesting, and then leaving it there and just kind of taking a step back and not buying into whatever story the stress, the overwhelm, and the anxiety is trying to perpetuate in your life, because that's exactly what it's doing. It's trying to keep you safe. You need to ask yourself, safe from what? Right? Safe from what in today's day and age? Like, we're not being chased by animals. We're not necessarily under attack. Although there are very much people living within that reality right now, and that is in and of itself a problem, and that is in and of itself impacting the collective energy. But we need to kind of understand the role that we're playing in perpetuating the story, and we need to take our power back, which means not feeding the story, not continuing to perpetuate it, not believing the things that come into our mind about this situation, whatever your version of the situation is, and then kind of reframing it and finding points of positivity, which is not always simple. I mean, it's simple enough to find things to be positive about or grateful for, but when we've been living for a prolonged period of time in a context where we've been feeding the negative emotions, then it can be more challenging to find a way to see the positive. But that really is the first step. And then from there, I would argue to take action. And in some cases, depending on the way that you move in the world, and this is where a certain amount of self-awareness is really important, but depending on how you move in the world, maybe taking action comes before reframing the story. I would argue that me being here, having this conversation with you, is me taking action before I have necessarily managed to reframe in a really positive way the situation that I'm in. So it's not that I haven't reframed it, because I reframed it enough to sit down here and record this episode, but perhaps this action is also the catalyst that takes that reframe to another level or integrates it a little bit deeper. The main point of this whole conversation, though, is really that there is freedom on the other side of anxiety if we are able to allow ourselves to get there. We have to make the choice at some point to kind of pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, kindly, gently, lovingly. Like, we're never taking self-care and, your like self-worth and kindness out of the equation. We do need to approach ourselves with those intentions always, because that is what helps us get out of the situations that we don't necessarily want to be in. But we have to do something. We have to make a change. We have to make another decision, whatever that might be, right? Because what is on the line is our own well-being. And I said at the beginning of the episode that my core values for my own personal existence, for my life, and for my business are the same. So wild, free, well. And what that means to me is just the freedom to be who I am and all do what I want to do and be the fullest version of myself and be well. It really just, that's the whole story. Wild is like exploring and being maybe somewhat adventurous. And all of those things lead to a really comprehensive version of the person that I know I'm meant to be here. And it can be really hard where we know something about ourselves and we feel disconnected from it. And that comes sometimes in moments of transition or challenge or whatever. But if we can also tap into those things and find ways to make them more prevalent in our lives, that'll also help us to move beyond the situation and to reach another level. I think too, I had said earlier that when we are in this space of control and micromanaging, it takes the lightness and the spontaneity out of life. Because the more that we're trying to have things under control so that we don't get thrown off course any more than we already are, because we already feel like we've been thrown off course. We already feel like the anxiety or the fear, the overwhelm is running the show, and we're trying to stop more of that from coming into our lives. I mean, yes, the main idea here would be that we are also perpetuating it, and of course that's true. But when we are micromanaging our lives, when we're controlling things, we are not leaving space for other good things to come into our lives, because those things come in unexpected ways. And when we're controlling, we are blocking the unexpected. We are doing everything in our power to avoid a situation that is unexpected, because the unexpectedness of it, when your system is already like, kind of at a high level or wired, is really triggering. It becomes even more stressful. But there are good things in spontaneity. There are good things in not knowing. One of the things that Tony Robbins says is that, humans need, and I don't know if this is actually from Tony Robbins, but that's the person that I heard talking about it. Humans need certainty and uncertainty in equal measure in order to live well, in order to have a really well-balanced life. And so that is something really important to keep in mind. Like, yes, you think that it's keeping you safe if you are controlling your life, but it's also closing you off from goodness. And it becomes this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy as well, where you're feeding the beast, as I've said too many times on this episode, and you're just perpetuating the cycle, and you're not leaving room for something new and good to come in. And then when something does come in that's new and good, right? If we can allow that, then that also creates a spiral. Like, it also helps us move forward. It also creates a positive ripple effect in our lives. It happens with us on the negative side of things, just the same as it happens on the positive side, if we let it. And then the last thing that I want to reiterate before I close out this episode is that freedom really is on the other side of all of this BS. It really is. It's hard to imagine, and I get that, but if we can learn to let go of control and we can learn to live in the uncertainty of life, and I would argue that this requires a more balanced nervous system and a certain amount of self-care, which we did not touch on in this episode, and we can definitely come back to that. But if we can allow ourselves to live in a little bit of uncertainty, if we can care for ourselves enough that we can hold that energy or hold space for that energy, that is where we are able to engage with new ideas. We are able to be more inspired, right? You're not going to necessarily be inspired from a heavier, closed off space. When you're micromanaging and controlling, the ideas aren't necessarily going to come. It's not going to feel light. It's not going to feel like you are living life. It's going to feel like you are existing. And I know that if you're here watching this or listening to this, that's not the life that you want for yourself. And I know for damn sure it's not the life I want for me, obviously. And so like that, yeah, it's really important to keep in mind of all that you stand to gain if you can just kind of Jesus take the wheel, about things, put your hands in the air and just kind of surrender and let go. Within reason. And you know what the limit is. You know what you need to let go of and don't want to. You know what you need to do to change and don't want to. You know what is holding you back. You don't want to know, but you know. Trust. I know that you know. And I know that you know that you know. But we don't want to admit it because it's scary. And that's okay too. That's okay too, because we're human. And like, it's all part of this game called life that we are all playing. And just one more thing that I'm going to repeat as well, because I will say it until the day I die. We need to be mindful of what we are consuming. We just are not. People are mistaking the information that they are reading online as informing themselves. Yes and no. I'm going to say yes and no. We need to be really, really mindful of what we let in. I don't care about the source. I don't care if it's mass media or if it's independent media. That's not the point. That's not the point. We need to be informed. Yes, we need to be aware of what's going on in the world. Okay, I agree. But we need to be mindful of how much time we spend sitting in that space. I cannot tell you how many clients over the course of the years I have convinced to stop watching the news. And I cannot tell you either, because it's difficult to quantify, how much their lives have changed just from that one simple thing. We need to be informed. We need to be mindful of what that looks like and how often we are engaging with these things and when in our day we are engaging with them. Probably not a great idea to do it first thing in the morning, an equally bad idea to do it last thing at night. Okay? So being really mindful of the way that we are allowing the collective energy into our space, into our lives, into our energy field, so that we can be the best version of ourselves. And I would argue that the best version of ourselves are not people who are hyper consuming any kind of content, including this kind of content. I don't care. I understand that I'm here filming this. I understand that I'm here telling you these things. I understand that sometimes they are useful, hopefully all the time. That's the dream. That's the goal. But I'm not going to lie and kid myself and say that it is. But we need to be mindful of the content that we are consuming under all aspects, under every umbrella. I really don't care, because any content that you're consuming, including positive content, is still going to be, in some ways, drowning out the voice in here and the voice in here. And those are the voices that we really need to be listening to. That is where our truth lies. That is where our connection to something bigger and grander than us lies. So we need to have pockets of silence and moments where we are not hyper consuming content of any kind in order to really hear what the hell is going on inside of us. So that would be my final kind of plea. I'm grateful that you're here listening to this. So grateful. But I do really feel like, and you'll know when, by the way, you'll know when you've reached your limit. You will know, you will feel it inside of you when the season of input versus output shifts. So you will know when you cannot take in anymore. You will have an innate knowing. You will understand inherently that it is a moment where you are not meant to be consuming any more content. And in that case, I beg of you, be brave and don't do it. Whether it's positive or otherwise, it doesn't matter. It really, really, really doesn't matter. Our systems need a break from the reality in which we find ourselves. We cannot constantly live in this space. We cannot constantly be consuming 24/7. And so, I mean, it's a whole other episode, but in any case, for now, I will leave you there. So, as always, this episode was a little bit heavier, more serious, less fun than they usually are. And I'm sorry for that, but I do feel like we had an important discussion and I really hope that it served you. That's the whole point. I hope that this has some kind of positive effect on you, or that it sparks an aha, or that you disliked it so much and disagreed so much that it gave you another idea. And if that's the case, tell me what your other idea is. I don't want to hear just that you disagreed. I want to hear why you disagreed, and I want to know what it was that it made you feel or made you realize. So yes, because it's all welcome here. It's all welcome here. It has been so lovely engaging with you. And if you'd like to know more about me or the work I do in the world, you know where to find me. And otherwise, I will see you on the next episode of the podcast. Ciao.